It's a beautiful day in the gaming store, a beautiful day for a game. Would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my commander?
Hi,
Hello,
welcome to the gaming store. I'm Steven,
this is Jacob.
and this is Won't You Be My Commander, the Magic the Gathering Commander podcast, where we talk about building janky decks and good times, really. It's been particularly good times this week, I guess, quote unquote, right, Jacob?
Well, I mean, for you, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting at my dinner table at my house. My wife is watching a show on Netflix with our newborn, and you're at home too, Jacob. So we don't get to sit together and look at the cards together. So this is our first experimental run for distance podcasting. So it's a little odd.
It is. It is.
We'll survive. So we had in the future weeks, we plan on coming out with a podcast where we're going to talk to one of our neighbors at the gaming store, Ethan. But because of scheduling and a bunch of craziness going on, we weren't able to get that to work this week. So instead, we're going to talk about a pet deck. I don't know. Do you have any pet decks, Jacob?
My Crick, Son of Yawgmoth, is probably my pet deck.
It's just that deck that just stays together no matter what, so that you can play it when you feel like it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know much about Crick. I'm sure is that the one where you give things to people?
No, that's Blim you're thinking of. No, Crick is the one that has the Phyrexian mana symbols. So instead of paying a black mana, play two life.
That thing. Yeah, I don't remember playing that one.
But very rare I play it again.
Is it that nasty?
Well, I mean, Nathan complained that I have Sorin, original Sorin Planeswalker. His -3 is target player life total becomes 10. Oof. And I can do that on turn 4. And Oof. Crick is 7 mana, Sorin is 6 mana.
Oof. Yeah, that's pretty brutal. We should play that sometime. But what we're going to talk about here is my first commander deck. I think I made it sometime in probably May this year, 2021, a few months after I'd started playing Magic in the first place. And I got to know you, and I got to know some other people at the store, and we decided that I was going to try out some commander. Open up a pack of Strixhaven, and I pull out the most attractive Loxodon I have ever seen in my life. And his name is Quintorious, the Field Historian. And Jacob, I can't explain why, but I decided I was going to make a commander deck out of him.
Well, I mean, he's a teacher. It's, history. I mean, there are a couple notes that kind of hit. It's also the colors of teachings of like how to fight with the magic and stuff like that in Strixhaven. And you're also, in the army. So I feel like it resonates you quite well.
Yeah, well, for those who don't know, I have a degree in history. I originally taught English, and I'm actually going to be transitioning to teaching history. So Quintorius was like a special place in my heart. For those who don't know who Quintorius is, he's Quintorius, the Field Historian. He is a 3 colorless, 1 red, 1 white elephant cleric. His abilities are spirits you control get +1/+0. And whenever 1 or more cards leave your graveyard, you create a 3/2 red and white spirit creature token. His quote is, "Every life has a story to tell. I won't let them be forgotten," which sometimes I just read that and get like good feels in my heart. I feel like Quintorius is like the driving force behind me wanting to do a podcast where it's all about love and kindness and fun.
Yeah, and the thing was, you didn't really have that many cards. Like, I know you said you got a package while you were in the army, and then you and 2 of your friends that you've been playing games with for years decided to pick it up and split a couple boxes over and with your collection, you just kind of like, I just threw every red, white card I had in there and then slowly upgraded as you bought more cards.
Yeah, so we're not going to do a standard breakdown of a deck like we have for Rogue Rack and for Killian. Instead, we're going to talk about some of the key features of the deck. And a lot of these were either gifts or traded for through neighbors, through you, through Ethan, Nathan, Zach. And a lot of it has just kind of been a community effort to make this deck fun. It's not hyper competitive by any means, but it's actually coming along to the point where it's functional. And so we're going to talk about just the element of Quintorious, what the deck is about, some of the fun cards that are in there, and then also, talk about the how to wins, even though there aren't very many, and some of the fun cards that we've added over time. So stick with us as we talk about Quintorius, the field historian, and really his army of spirits, I guess, is the goal. So continue on with us. All right, welcome back to Won't You Be My Commander? In this segment, we're going to talk about the how to wins, Jacob. And with Quintorius, he's so focused on history and making sure that history's remembered that he's not really worried about winning. Let's be honest.
Yeah, he's kind of your fun commander.
I mean, essentially all Quintorius does is create spirits and try to survive long enough. In my experience, I haven't created too many spirits with him by exiling too many cards. Only in rare, crazy graveyard hate games with Zach, the mayor, or something like that, have I ever created double-digit spirits in one go.
Remember the key to Quintorius, it says one or more. So if 10 cards get exiled, you still only make one spirit. If one card exile it's still one spirit.
Yeah, there was some trigger, though, that we were playing against Zach. I don't remember when it was a couple months ago or a month ago, and there was something he was playing that was making us exile a card from our graveyard, and something cued it to happen multiple times, and ultimately it was individual triggers, and I ended up creating 12 spirits. And we all looked at each other like, does that work with Quintorius? And in this case, it was individual triggers that actually worked out in my favor, and then it made me the big bad guy, and he killed me shortly after. But that's okay. So the how to wins for this one is really just create spirits, nonsense, have fun, and then, quite honestly, mob rule at the end. That's it. Send podcast. Just mob rule.
I roll.
Yeah,
I've won. It's literally just been mob rule.
Yeah, I think maybe 4 or 5 times with Quintorius at this point. I've won with mob rule. There was one where you left me living, and it was you and I facing off each other, and I just next play just mob ruled, and I won it. Quintorius, he's too busy reading the books. All he cares about is mob rule. And when I top deck mob rule, life is good because I know most of the time I'm gonna win. I do have an Embercleave in here, but quite honestly, Embercleave is maybe that difference maker that's going to produce a chance to deal the damage that needs to be done to finish off a game. But I don't really recall ever using it in that way. It's really just a nice power to have. It gives, some creature double strike and trample. So
I remember you putting it on a certain dragon and someone in the face to kill them.
Oh, yeah. Let's go ahead and introduce that dragon just for fun. We'll kind of pull a little part from a later segment. I have this very beautiful extended art Velomachus Lorehold that our neighbor Ethan gave me. And that with Embercleave, yes, that's a problem. Velomachus is a 5 colorless, 1 red, 1 white elder dragon, flying, vigilance, haste, and then whenever he attacks, you get to look at the top 7 cards of your library, and you can cast an instant or sorcery spell with a mana value less than Velomachus's power, so less than 5. That's, there are a lot of instants and sorceries that are more than that in this deck, but there's a lot that I could cast for that. Could be super great. Makes Velomachus terrifying, honestly.
It's always nice because usually when you drop that dragon, it's all fun and games, but it's you're like, okay, I don't want to commit anything else right now because I kind of want Quintorius for this stuff to get that value. Everyone else is kind of developed. Well, I'm going to drop this big dumb dragon. I'm going to flip the top cards of my deck and either I hit for a big hit or I find my board wipe.
Yeah, and really, what the key of the deck is to get cards into the graveyard so that you can pull them out or exile them. And so Velomachus is a heavy hitter, hits for 5, has flying, all those things. but also can trigger casting these spells that would allow me to have something that might have flashback in my graveyard that I could then cast and create a spirit. So there's a lot of use for Velomachus to just get things in the graveyard. So by no means is Quintorius a spirit tribal deck. It's probably the closest I'll ever get, but not just spirits in this deck, because Velomachus is holding it down. So then that's really, those are the only how to wins. Imber Cleave with some creature, most of the time Velomachus, and then Mob Rule. Honestly, I've never won without Mob Rule at this point. And you know what? That's okay. That's okay. I like to fly under the radar. So we'll get into the next part, and that's talking about card draw. We talked about Rogue Rack and how card draw is a problem. Quintorius doesn't quite have that problem because you have the Faithless Looting, those kind of cards, but also you have, we use a lot of cycling in this deck, or not a lot, but there's enough cycling in there. And then we also use the Bag of Holding, the pre-Adventures in Forgotten Realms one, by the way. This is the rare one, everybody. So it's probably worth a few cents more. I think the artwork's better than Adventures in Forgotten Realms as well. That's my hot take. But Bag of Holding, one colorless artifact. Whenever you discard a card, exile that card from your graveyard. You can pay to tap, draw a card, then discard a card. And at any point, you can pay for and tap it and sacrifice the Bag of Holding to return all the cards exiled with Bag of Holding to their owner's hand. This is awesome for a multitude of reasons. Card draw, obviously, you get to kind of choose what's in your hand, but also everything that discards goes to the graveyard. And then when it leaves the graveyard, there's a Quintorious trigger. And so there's a 3/2 spirit, and with Quintorious on the field, it's a 4/2 spirit. And so every turn, you have something to use your mana for. You can always be paying that to do that. But then it also benefits from cycling, and it also benefits from, any discard, the red discard draw. So Faithless Looting, draw however many cards, discard this many cards. It benefits us because then those are all going back into the Bag of Holding for later. I want to say, outside of that, the card draw is pretty normal.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing about the Quintorious deck, because you want so many things leaving your graveyard, you are trying to find ways to pull them out. So you're going to have like your flashback spells, your things that will protect your hand, so on and so forth. So like the nice thing about being red-white, card draw isn't the greatest. Red is usually a looting color, and then white has such situational card draw. But with Quintorious, it's like, well, I want this card in the graveyard, or if I put this card in the graveyard, I can still cast it later, and it gets me a spirit. So, like, you will always have something to do in Quintorious, or you should.
Yeah, there's some kind of, it might not be the greatest synergy, but there's something there that gives you some point forward, right? And something I learned with the Bag of Holding and other cards, card draw, is I was scared to discard cards, and so whenever I'd play Quintorious, I feel like, at least up until recently, I felt like I was stagnating. And it was because I was too scared to discard cards. When it turns out that the discard mechanism is really what drives Quintorious, and not to be scared to lose those cards, because there will always be a time where you might be able to pull them out again.
Yeah, and yes, there's graveyard hate in Commander, or at least there should be. But you can't always be afraid of certain mechanics for shutting down your deck. And sometimes, you're going to run into a table where someone just shuts you down. Like your buddy Brandon has a cat deck just like mine. There's a guy we used to play with, Prez. He used to do Hirobi. Well, Hirobi is a hard counter to a Rabo, because a Rabo, you have to target a cat at the beginning of combat. So you're always going to run into those situations where someone has the deck that kind of automatically sweeps you under the rug.
Yeah. Well, and for me anyways, the beauty of Quintorious is that he doesn't pose that major of a threat until later in the game. And so the graveyard hate is pretty much non-existent until it's too late. I guess, in my opinion. There was that time when Zach, it was like every upkeep or something, everybody had to exile a card or something like that. And that's what was creating spirits really fast. And so in that way, I was like, oh, this is great. But otherwise, everybody looks at Quintorious and they go, oh, yeah, that's not that scary. I'm not really worried about that. And so I kind of fly under the radar till the very end. And I feel like second place is a pretty common theme for this deck.
Well,
Just
I
because
think
I stay out of the way.
Yeah, well, that and like there are times where I've seen you build an army of spirits, but it's just you're popping off, but so is the whole table. So it's like, well, Quintorius is keeping up, but here's a board wipe.
Yep. And when board wipes happen, it can really slow me down. So getting out of card draw, let's get into some of the things that we use to pull cards out of the graveyard. Starting with some instant or some creatures. So this has probably been reprinted a few times, and I think I got it from you, is the Sun Titan, which is a 4 colorless, 2 white giant with vigilance. And whenever Sun Titan enters the battlefield or attacks, you may return target permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. It's a 6/6, so it's kind of a beast, but also that's 1 trigger when it enters, and then could be multiple triggers throughout its lifespan. That's enchantments, that's little creatures here and there, and every time that happens, there's a Quintorious trigger. And so I feel like he's been really effective at that, and I think that was one where you were like, hey, you really need to put a Sun Titan in your deck just to have it.
It's also really nice because, like, if you did let this looting earlier away some lands, it can still hit lands, and that still triggers Quintorius.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I feel like sometimes I remember that, and other times I forget, and that's why I play with you, Jacob, because you remind me of the things that I forget as a newbie. Because then I can discard lands and not feel bad about it.
Yeah, well, because you also have that enchantment. I don't know if you've pulled that out while you're upgrading, because this, like you said, this is your pet deck. You've been trading and upgrading, and we've been discussing it for all, and you can tell by just our other 2 episodes how much we reference your Quintorious deck. Yep. So like you had that enchantment where it says all your lands gain pay a red cycle.
Yeah, I don't have it pulled out, but I was looking at it. Tectonic Reformation.
Yeah.
So like each land in your hand has cycling 1 red.
So like that's the nice thing is like, oh, I get this early. I'm just drawing lands. Well, I'm just gonna cycle some of these lands away to. So the one thing I think Quintorius is really teaching you is card selection. So it's like, well, like I don't want to get rid of these 7 cards because I might need them, but then you're learning that, well, these 7 cards haven't done anything for me for 2-3 turns. Pitch them, get new ones, find something that's relevant to the current state of the game.
Yeah, and it's definitely, I texted you just the other day because I was playing some Spell Table. I was like, I think I'm finally starting to kind of grasp Quintorius and the way it should be piloted, because I'm much more relevant than I ever was before. And a lot of that is being willing to hand off my lands when the going gets rough, or knowing when to flash something out of the graveyard. So the Sun Titan is our first one. The next one we have is the Backdraft Kite, which is a 3 colorless, 2 red dragon that whenever it attacks, each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until the end of turn. And then the flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. So cheap flashback and access to your graveyard for getting rid of, I don't know, maybe you do need a board wipe, or maybe you need a card draw. Like, that's a really great way
or you need to get back that mob rule you pitched early in the game because it wasn't relevant.
Exactly. And people forget about it, and they don't realize, oh crap, he just pulled a mob rule out of his graveyard. And I feel like it can get a lot more fun. And so Backdraft Hellkite's really handy for that.
Because it's nice because, like, I mean, yeah, you've already attacked that turn, but you know, sometimes you can mob rule for value where, like, hey, this person over here has a creature that sacrifices creatures. Well, let me just mob rule these creatures and then sack them all to clear the board, stuff like that. So, like, Quintorius has really helped you to think outside the box.
Yeah. And getting back to the mob rule again real quick, is I was playing a game on Spell Table recently where a guy had, like, the 4 best slivers on the table, and no one could find. They had indestructible, had no way to kill them, and I top decked mob rule, and I mob ruled him and smacked him in the face with his own slivers, and I was like, oh, that's amazing. And the guy was, you know, probably a little bit salty, I imagine, but like, it was a good way to take care of the situation. And so mob rule, again, this is one giant mob rule advertisement. This episode brought to you by mob rule. Getting back to the creatures. This is a recent one from Crimson Vow. Fleeting Spirit. It's a 2-drop, so 1 colorless, 1 white spirit. So it gets the bonus from Quintorius. So it becomes a 4/1 when Quintorius is out on the field. But you can pay 1 white, exile 3 cards from your graveyard. So there's 1 Quintorius trigger, and then Fleeting Spirit gains first strike until the end of turn. So it's first strike, 4/1 first strike. That's not bad, right? For a 2-drop.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's pretty sweet. Then you can discard a card, exile Fleeting Spirit, and then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. So my question here is, you discard the card, can you exile Fleeting Spirit from the graveyard, from the battlefield, or is there a specific place that it could be exiled from?
I believe this one has to be on the battle.
Okay, so it avoids a board wipe. Okay, because I was looking through it, and I thought that potentially, if it was in the graveyard, you could discard a card and exile Fleeting Spirit.
No, it would say
And then-
return it to the battlefield at the
Okay.
beginning of its owner's next end step.
Or something like that. Okay. Still a good card, in my opinion. Because every turn you can pay 1 and you can exile cards from your graveyard and gain some kind of bonus while also creating spirits. That can be done multiple times in a turn even, right?
Yeah, as long as you pay 1 white and have 3 cards to exile.
Okay. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, because the exile 3 cards is part of the activation cost. So that's
Yeah.
the one thing in Magic people, like newer players, might not realize is if it's before the colon or semicolon, it's the activation cost. So all that has to be met before the effect.
Interesting. So even if Fleeting Spirit has first strike already, you've done it once, you can do it again?
Yeah, it doesn't
Wow.
say once per turn.
So you could get a couple triggers off that? I don't know if I'd ever use it because that's a lot of cards to exile right away, but that's not bad.
I mean, if you think about it, you get Quintorius out and Fleeting Spirit, and it's the late game, and like people haven't really recovered too much. You can just pay a white as many times as you want and exile 3 cards as many times as you can, and all of a sudden you have an army of 4 somethings
Yeah.
by the
And
time it's
maybe
your
it-
turn again, because you can do
Maybe
this
you
at
get
instant
Perforos
speed.
out. Maybe if you
That
get
too.
Perforos out, and now you have an army of, spirits with haste. I don't know.
Well, you have the haste Perforos. You don't have the impact.
I have both of them.
tremors. You have both Perforoses?
Yeah.
Oh, 'cause, I know you have impact tremors in there too.
Yeah, I have Perforos the Bronze Blooded. That's the haste from Theros.
The last
And then
Theros, yeah.
Yep, the most recent one. Sorry, I forget that there's a billion of them. And then there's Perforos, God of the Forge, which is whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, deals 2 damage to each opponent. That could be pretty nuts. I'm just now looking at Fleeting Spirit like, wow, that's super great.
Yeah, sometimes you forget the synergies. You are like, oh yeah, this would be good with this, and then later you look at it, it's like, oh, this is good with this, and then all of a sudden you're like looking over the deck, you're like, oh, this is good with all of these.
Yeah, and it works out. I remember pulling it out of a pack and saying, well, that needs to go into my Quintorious deck, and I guess I didn't totally grasp the gravity of the situation because that's a 2-drop, so that's pretty excellent. So our last creature that we'll talk about that causes it causes Quintorious triggers is Hoffrey Ghostforge, which I've heard a few people make decks out of it, and they do Spirit Tribal with him, which is funny because I do Spirits, but I don't do Spirit Tribal. He's a 3 colorless, 1 red, 1 white Dwarf Cleric. Spirits you control get +1/+1 and have Trample and Haste. And then whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you exile it. So then there's 1 trigger. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except it's a spirit in addition to its other types, and it has, when this creature leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to your graveyard. So you get the trigger, and then that token creature could be a creature with, I don't know, with some kind of ETB effect, like Sun Titan, right? And so now all of a sudden you're getting another ETB of returning cards out of your graveyard that results in, a chain lightning of spirits coming out of the graveyard that have Trample and Haste and +1/+1.
And it's really nice because you could be like, oh, I have Quintorius and I have Hoffrey out and I'm popping off, but the whole table's popping off. Well, here's my, what is it, Doom Scar or whatever that you foretell.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, oh, I wiped the board. The only thing I lost was Huff. And because all my other creatures just got went to the graveyard, exiled, came back, and now they're in play. So it's like, yeah, I lost Hoffrey, but I still have my army, and everyone else's creatures are dead. So like,
yeah,
and it's also it goes back to that impact tremors in Perforos where you just peg a bunch of damage on the board by, oh yeah, there's a board wipe or destroying my own creatures somehow and just causing all these triggers to happen.
Yeah, I think that's optimum Quintorious. When I get there, it feels really good. It doesn't happen very frequently, I don't think. Some enchantments that we have that kind of mess with the graveyard. The first one is a 2-drop, Underworld Breach, 1 colorless, 1 red. Each non-land card in your graveyard has escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost, plus exile 3 other cards from your graveyard, and then at the beginning of the end step, sacrifice Underworld Breach. So it's not a long-lasting thing, but could theoretically trigger a lot of spirit creation. Just with, there's the exiling the card is one trigger, and then casting the card, another card, is a trigger. And if you do that multiple times, you're talking 4, 5, 6 spirits in a turn. And so that's I feel like a really good enchantment for a late game play. I wouldn't do it really early on when my graveyard's too small, though. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
No, that's kind of a card you try to save for later. You want to do incremental value. Like if you have a Sun Titan, you can bring it back. So like,
and then,
but you kind of have to like, oh, I have this and Sun Titan. Well, I need a couple blockers or creatures to get myself in this game. I'll play it now and get back these cheap spells. And then it's like, oh, now I have 6 mana or more than 6 mana, and I want to really go off. Oh, here's a Sun Titan, or attack with Sun Titan, and then bring it back, and then you can cast more spells again.
Yeah. I feel like I could really play Underworld Breach a lot better in the future. And that may be something that just requires practice. It's just one of those things that newbie players have to learn. I see it mentioned a lot on Twitter, like when people are talking about card draw and access to spells in red. A lot of people mention Underworld Breach, and I guess I didn't totally recognize the importance of the card until recently.
Well, the biggest thing, which you haven't really run into too much in our play group, is red is a storm color. So it's going to have a lot of the rituals like add 3 red mana or add 2 red mana or mana geyser, add red mana for each tap land your opponent's control. Like, well, I play that. Well, I have Underworld Breach. Now I escape that. Now I have all this mana to cast my other spells, and then usually have a card that either does like Crackle of Power, where you kill everyone with one big X spell, or you do something that has Storm that gives you a lot of triggers, like Grape Shot, deals 1 damage to any target, but you just cast 100 spells this turn because of Underworld Breach.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh, I kill you and I kill you.
It just optimizes from there, if you can get that going. So we'll get into a few of the other things. The second enchantment I pulled out is Sigil of the New Dawn. It's a 4-drop, so 3 colorless, 1 white. It's from some old set. I'm not even going to pretend to know. As early as 2002. But whenever a creature is put into your graveyard from play, you may pay 1 colorless, 1 white, and if you do, you return that card to your hand. So good board wipe protection, and also even if it's not board wipe protection, it's a good way to lose creatures to create a spirit to then recast the creature and get some of those ETB effects. I haven't drawn it very frequently, and so I haven't really gotten to see it in play the way I want it to. But even then, you could. So my question for you is, whenever a creature is put into your graveyard from play, does that mean from my hand or from the battlefield?
From the battlefield. So you must have the one from Onslaught with the old border, and it's got like reprinted. It got reprinted in Ultimate Masters, and it actually looks like a sigil with the sun behind it. It's an uncommon here, but yeah, the new version reads: whenever a creature is put into your graveyard from the battlefield. So play usually means battlefield. Because they changed the language to help new players understand. Like, play is still a tricky term in Magic to this day.
Yeah.
But the one thing I really like about this is it combos so well with Hoffrey. It's like I board wipe, I pay 2, I return Hoffrey to my hand. So I'm getting even more spirit triggers from Quintorius.
Mm-hmm. I'd really, I guess this is one of those cards where I've always looked at it in the deck and I know it has its place. I've just never gotten to play it. And so I haven't really gotten to see how good it is.
Because it's pay 2 mana, return my 5 mana commander to my hand instead of the command zone.
Oh, yeah. Ooh, I didn't even think about that. That's something the veteran players would think about. I wouldn't even realize it. So when Quintorius dies, you can just pay 2 to return him to your hand. And you're not really worried about the spirit trigger at that point. You're just worried about getting Quintorius back.
Yeah, because how often Quintorius will pop off, everyone's popping off, board wipe, my commander's 3 mana, blah blah blah's commander's 4 mana, blah blah blah's commander's 3 mana, and you're sitting here with Quintorius 5 mana, and you're like, oh, now it's 7. Well, I got 7 mana, I'll play Quintorius. Oh, well, he dies again because you're popping off. Now he's 9 mana. Like, how often do you have? It's like, oh, I tap 9 mana, play Quintorius past turn. It doesn't feel good. Where you can just be like, I pay 2 or return Quintorius to my hand. My next turn, I play Quintorius for 5. I have 4 open mana to cast other things and do things. Like, it helps you develop overall.
Yeah. I feel like I haven't really tried graveyard shenanigans with Quintorius himself. Like, I haven't been like, yeah, he'll go to the graveyard. I'll pull him out at another time.
Yeah, well, you don't have too many white bring back spells. I think you have
like a lot of the creatures do, and so maybe that's why I don't do it, is because I don't want to use the creatures to do that.
Well, because he costs 5, so like Sun Titan can't hit him, but Karmic Guide could hit him. But like you're usually trying to save Karmic Guide to get something back that's important, like, if your Hoffrey's in the graveyard, or one of your dragons, like the Kite that gives your instant sorceries flashback, or your Sun Titan, and you're trying to get these triggers to trigger on Quintorius.
Yeah, you're really not wanting to use Quintorius or use all those triggers on Quintorius. You want to use them for the other things that will benefit. And that might be, one of the sad things. And maybe that's something I can consider. We'll talk about that. Coming to a sorcery, Angelfire Ignition. It's a 3-drop, 1 colorless, 1 red, 1 white from Midnight Hunt. You put 2 1/1 counters on target creature. It gains Vigilance, Trample, Lifelink, Indestructible, and Haste until the end of turn. And then it has Flashback for 4. And so you get all of that. You get 2 1/1 counters that you can put on whatever you want. It gains all of these resistances, and then you can flash it back and gain a spirit.
Yeah, that's really cool about it. And it's really nice too, is like I get Bag of Holding or something. I made a spirit. Well, and then I drew this off a Bag of Holding. Well, now let's do 1 counters. Give that spirit Vigilance, Trample, Lifelink, Indestructible, and Haste. Well, so now you have what, a
6?
4?
Yeah. Yep, 6/4.
Yeah, and it attacks and it's gaining your life, and then it's like, oh, next turn I play this cheap, affordable creature, and then it's like, oh, I flash back again to give this creature haste so I can do whatever this thing can do, and then get another spirit.
And then if Hoffrey's in there, that spirit has double strike.
Oh, that's right. Oh.
Yeah, so that could get like real gross really fast. Not to mention Velomachus. If you bring back Velomachus with Hoffrey, he becomes a spirit. So then he becomes a 7/6 with Vigilance, Flying, Haste, and double strike. So that's 2 Velomachus triggers. God, that'd be sweet. The things
Is it
that could
2?
happen.
I thought it only triggered on attack.
Oh, it does whenever Velomachus attacks. So double strike doesn't count as 2 attacks.
No, it's just 2 different points of the phase.
That makes me sad. Always crushing my hopes and dreams. That's what you do. That's what you do best.
Someone's got
All
it.
right, we'll carry on. This will be the last one, and then we'll head into the next segment where you can talk about some of the things that like are dream cards for the deck. The last 2 things we've already talked about: Perforal, Scout of the Forge, which is the Perforos that whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. This would also be really good for Rogue Rack, but for those who don't know me, I don't take decks apart. I just build decks with whatever cards I have left. And so if I ever got another Perforal out of the Forge, sure, I put that in Rogue Rack, but I don't have one. And so this one's going in Quintorious because he's my pet deck. But on top of that, we do have Impact Tremors, which is a 2-drop and does the same thing as Perforos, except it only deals 1 damage. But it can add up pretty fast.
Oh, I've seen it where we had to get rid of one of those two so you would stop pinging us all. Because the one game, I think you got us all down to like the low 20s, and we're like, okay, that's
enough. Well, and I think there was one time where the Impact Tremors literally just ended one person. Like they were at 1 life, and it was just, there you go, see you later. Gone. And so they're just, in a way, they're bad for Quintorious because they kind of draw attention to you. But at the same time, it also just kind of makes you relevant, I guess. And not to mention, Perforos is...
Mob rule better later.
True. And it's a creature. Perforos is a creature. And on top of that, you can pay 3, and all of the creatures you control get +1 until the end of turn. So that could be like your final blow if you ever needed it. And so I feel like, despite it being kind of getting some of the aggro from the table, that it's going to be helpful in the long run more than anything. And Impact Tremors early in the game doesn't impact people as much, and so they kind of leave you alone. But if you can get Impact Tremors and Perforos and start triggering off some flashbacks and stuff, talking some major damage.
Or that White Spirit you talked about from Crimson Vow or Underworld Breach, it's like, you're losing like 3 cards from your graveyard every time, but at the same time, so many triggers because you only need, let's say you have both Impact and Perforos out. Usually people will be at about 32 lives in a very safe game where people's life totals haven't changed much. You only need 10 triggers of Quintorious to just make those spirits. Yeah.
If that ever happens, I feel like I'm going to document my face as it happens, and I will just post it everywhere and be like, this was my face when Quintorious did this to everybody. This is when I finally realized that I made it. All right, so we're gonna, in the next segment, we're gonna talk about some of the cards that you know of that you would like to add to Quintorious that I can probably find from some neighbors at some point, and we'll go from there. All right, we're back, Jacob, and now we're gonna talk about the veteran player perspective of what can be done to make Quintorious maybe just a little bit better, a little bit more competitive.
So like normally I would have like lists of cards, but because this is your pet deck and it's kind of the deck that you've started learning everything from, I've kind of let you try to take it the direction you want. Because like Quintorious, you could do that whole Underworld Breach Storm kind of thing, where you storm off and just get a bunch of spirits that way. Otherwise, white and black share a common theme in the color pie of bringing things back. So a card like Refurbish, it's 3 colorless and a white sorcery. Target artifact from your graveyard to the battlefield. So this could be like an artifact creature, just more return effects. So it's like, bring it back. And then, and having more, being a little more risky, discard to draw cards kind of thing. Like, you don't really have any wheel effects. So for those who don't know what a wheel effect is, it's where either you discard or everyone discards and draws that many cards.
We do have, I have Glorbath's Fury in here.
Yep.
That's probably the only one I have.
But the thing is like, you're kind of finding the niche where Quintorious. So like, as you can, everyone could probably tell from the cards you listed in this podcast, your Quintorious deck does a little bit of everything, and right now you have more value and flexibility in your deck. Where if you really wanted to go like super hard, this deck can win as long as there isn't 3 blue players at the table. You could go for that more combo-y kill. Where I think you made your Quintorious deck more of a value deck, more of like a mid-range is what people might refer to. Since you love mob rule so much, is Insurrection. 5 red sorcery. Untap all creatures and gain control of them all until end of turn. They gain haste until end of turn.
Oh.
So it's more mana intensive.
Oof. I like that. That would be nice to have maybe another one of those.
I know you, like, almost every red deck, you always have to stick some sort of I hijack your creature or active creature in it.
Yeah. It just, it gives it some of the power that it needs, I feel like. I don't know. I mean, Rogue Rack, that's its focus. If I had another mob rule would go in Rogue Rack. Hands down.
I think it's because you're a new player and you're like, you know what? I like your toy. I don't own your toy. I want to try playing with your toy. And that's why you probably go towards that. I'm going to steal that from you and use it. And see how...
Yeah. Well, and Lord knows, everybody I play creates armies a lot better than I do. So now I steal your armory and hit you with it, I feel like. But... So that's, I feel like that's the bones, I don't know, the meat and potatoes, really, of Quintorius, at least as I've built him. He's always a work in progress. He's always reflecting on the past to improve himself in the future. And he'll always be around. Quincy is my best bud, to the point where Ethan even bought me his mini for my birthday. And so I have a little Quintorious mini that I put out on the table. And so Quincy will always be around. That's my nickname for him. And so we look forward to throwing this up on Moxfield. And I'd like to see what kind of decks, like you were mentioning, kind of like the Storm idea, those kind of things. I'd kind of be curious what kind of more higher powered decks people could come up with. So maybe we'll go talk to Cole at Uncommon Commander and see what he produces.
Yeah. By the way, what do you put mini and deck in?
Oh, I have this special box. It's his home, his study. And for my birthday, Jacob drew a picture of Quintorius on the front with the Kurt Vonnegut quote. And inside of it is all of the things I need for Quintorius. So the deck, and then his mini, and then the stack of spirits, Japanese spirits, holographic spirits, everything I need. And so all of my decks live in my deck storage box besides Quintorius. I carry him around in his special little study. And I try to get him to play, a couple times a week at least. He's just my favorite. I don't know why. Beyond just like the whole idea of being the historian, he's not incredibly overpowered. He's not anything over the top special. But to me, he's just that right flavor that got me into Commander.
I think it's because no matter like how poorly it was constructed in the beginning because you're a new player to now, you've always seemed to be somewhat relevant in games. And I feel like you can take Quintorius and be like, well, this is a table of new players. Or you can take Quintorius and be like, oh, these are all the guys who've been playing, 5+ years. Or specialize in Commander, and like you could go to either table and feel like you're having a good, fun game, which I think that's what 90% of playing Magic is for you, is that social part and having fun.
Yeah, like casual for me is I try to win, but I just like building my own little machine with Quintorius, and that's the fun for me. So I could end up losing. I don't really care. It's just mostly the journey along the way, which I think Quintorius would appreciate in the real world.
I think that does about... I can't even speak. Go ahead.
I think that about does it, don't you, Jacob?
Yeah.
All right, well, that's Quintorius. Keep an eye on the Moxfield. Give us a follow. Let us know what you think. And hopefully you get this week to go and visit the gaming store, go find your friends, play some Commander, have some fun, and just enjoy the hobby. Until next time.
Won't you be my commander?